Hello, my name is Joshua Keith, and this is theburningcoal.com, a website dedicated to God's glory, His grace, and our response to it. So, today is Thanksgiving, and this year we've been doing a lot of Thankful Thursdays. Week after week, we've just been talking about the different things that we're able to be thankful for. And it's really been impressive to look at everything that God has done. And really, these have just been 5 minute discussions on small things where if we spend time, we could meditate on them for much longer and see exactly how much it is that God is doing for us. But why have we been taking the time to be having these thankful Thursdays? And what should be our mindset, as we're coming into Thanksgiving? Why should we make sure that we spend some time being thankful in particular? I worry that sometimes we take the idea of being thankful for granted, that we may just say, yeah, thanks, God, and that's about the end of the conversation. But I think what we see in scriptures is that it's really important that as Christians, we have a mindset of thankfulness, that we're continually going back to God, not just one day a year, in particular, a day of the year that's main focus is possibly on the food that we're eating. Instead, we should be taking the time to be thankful to God every single day. And it's important in our Christian walk. It's going to impact all the other aspects of our life. And so we're going to take a look at four passages. There's a lot more that we could look at, but we're going to take a look at four passages that I think really explain why we should be thankful. The first one is in Romans chapter 1, and in verse 21 it says, "For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him. But they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened." This passage is incredibly powerful in talking about the idea of thanksgiving because what we see as we go through the rest of this first chapter is God continually giving people over to their sin. They've chosen to go away from God, and God has tried to teach them. He wants them to be in a relationship with Him. But at a certain point, He's going to say, that's your choice. And if this is what you choose, then so be it. And so He will give them up into all of these different profane things. But where does it start? It starts here in verse 21 that they knew who God was, but they didn't honor Him. And part of that lack of honor was not giving thanks to Him. And so once they refused to give thanks, it colored everything in their lives. Notice how they became futile in their thinking. Without proper thanksgiving, without taking the time to acknowledge and appreciate the things that God has done for us, it changes the way that we think. We no longer are thinking properly because we're continually focused on us, on what we do, the power that we have, the things that we're facing, instead of focusing on God and what He's done. And in fact, what winds up happening quite a bit of the time is we become arrogant in ourselves. We start thinking that we're the reason why we have success, why we have these blessings, why we have these things that we should be thankful for. And so, if we're not attributing it to the creator of the universe who gave us all these things, we look around and say, well, who should I be thankful to for this? And a lot of times, we thank ourselves. We thank the things that we did, the wonderful decisions that we made. You see how quickly that goes into futile thinking, how that makes us foolish, and we become darkened. Again, this idea of turning away from God. We no longer are appreciating the things of God. And when we turn away from God, whenever we stop appreciating what God has given us, it really takes us down a dark path. And it impacts everything about who we are, about what we do. And even worse, it impacts those that are around us. I think a good example of this is in Proverbs 22:10. Notice what is stated here. It says, "Drive out a scoffer, and strife will go out, and quarreling and abuse will cease." He sees here someone who is mocking, someone who is not being appreciative. We have the exact opposite of the thankful attitude. But again, looking at themselves, thinking that they're above things, mocking others who would pay attention to God. And what winds up happening is these people who refuse to be thankful, all of a sudden their lives start having strife. They're constantly fighting with other people. And again, when we put ourselves in the place of God, when we're thankful to ourselves instead of God, of course we're going to have an inflated opinion of ourselves, of our will, of what should be done, of how people should respond to us. In fact, they should be being thankful to us, not towards God. They should be thankful to us. And so you can see how the strife comes out how when we're constantly expecting these people to acknowledge the God that we have made ourselves to be. And the quarreling and the abuse, again, people who refuse to have the right mindset towards God, it's going to cause these problems in their lives. And it doesn't just affect them. You know, the Proverbs also talks about how it's better to live in the corner of the attic than to live with a quarreling woman. Like it's very difficult to live with somebody who is quarrelsome. And while it's talking about the wife in that particular regard, what we understand is it doesn't matter what relationship you have a person, when they become a scoffer, when they become futile in their thinking, when they're putting themselves in an elevated position because they are not humbled by the thanksgiving, it makes not just them miserable, but everyone else around them miserable. And so we need to make sure that we have this right attitude so that we can have peace in our relationships with other people, so that we can have the love and joy that Paul talks about with the fruit of the Spirit. This happens because we are in submission to God, because we have understood exactly who we are in relationship with Him. Once we lose that mindset of thanksgiving, we lose why we should even listen to God in the first place. Another passage that I think is very important is Philippians 4:6. It says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God." One of the other reasons why we should be thankful is because it can give us confidence in what life throws at us. Because let's face it, life can be really hard. And in fact, we may wonder what there is to be thankful for sometimes because life gets so hard. But that's why Paul instructs us that when we go to God in prayer, when we're facing those battles, when we're facing those mountains, when we don't know what to do, we take it to God. But we don't just take it to God and focus on the problem. Instead, he tells us to focus on the thanksgiving. Well, why is that important? Well, one, it's what's appropriate. We'll talk about that more in just a second. But two, it reminds us of all the battles that God has taken care of to get us to this point. It reminds us that God has defeated sin in our own lives, that He has taken us when we were destroyed by sin, when we were guilty of it, when we were dead in our trespasses, and He made us alive. And so it does not matter what it is that we're facing now. And again, those things can be really hard. I know. We go to God with thanksgiving because it helps us to remember exactly who we're relying on in these difficult situations. And that's why we do not need to be anxious about anything. We can let go of those anxieties. And really I think this is very helpful for us again. If we're struggling with anxiety, if we're struggling with stress, if we're worried about all the things that are happening in the world, step back. Go to God in thanks and let that thanksgiving be what rules your heart, not the anxiety, not the stress, not you trying to fix these situations, but instead a heart of joy because you know what God has already done. You know what God has promised He will do. And so you can handle all of these situations with confidence. You can face them knowing that you will be victorious overall because of all the things that God has already done. And so Thanksgiving isn't just important because it helps correct our thinking towards God. It's not just important because it helps our relationship with other people, but it's also important because it helps us to deal with the obstacles of life. We should be consistent in going to God and talking to Him about what He's done and appreciating it. Because when we don't, Satan has us right where he wants us. Finally, we should be thankful to God because it's just the appropriate and right thing to do. Notice what the psalmist says in Psalm 103. Bless the Lord, O my soul, all that is within me. Bless His holy name. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all His benefits. You who forgives all your iniquity, who heals all your diseases, who redeems your life from the pit, who crowns you with steadfast love and mercy, who satisfy you with good so that your youth is renewed like the eagles. I think this passage is so powerful because, again, it talks about how our entire focus should be on praise and on thanksgiving to God because of what He's done. Because He has forgiven us of our sins. But not just that. I mean, that would be enough in and of itself. If that was the only thing God had ever done for us, that would be enough. But it's more than that. He brought us into being. Without Him, you and I are not here. We do not take a breath. We do not exist without God. Not only that, as the psalmist points out, He has taken us and He has made us a little lower than the angels. Of all of the creations in the world, of all the things that God built, He looked at us and He said, I want there to be something different about you. I want you to be in my image. I want to have a relationship with you. If we truly take the time to think about all the things that God has done for us, it is staggering. And that's why it's appropriate for us to spend that time giving thanks. It's not good for us to take advantage of what God has done. It's not good for us to just act like the things that are happening in our life are by our own power, that we're the ones who are in control of our own destiny. And in fact, a lot of times when that happens, isn't it just so that life shows you how little control you actually have? We need to give God thanks because He deserves it, because He is worthy of it. And so let's make sure that we spend time today, but not just today, every day, giving thanks to the God and Father of us all. I hope this lesson blesses you in your walk in His kingdom.